Thank you so much again for joining me on this channel. As always, I'm very grateful for all your previous views, likes, subscriptions and shares. Particularly warm welcome if you've only just recently discovered this channel. And it's Black History Month and has become a tradition. I like to explore religious pioneers. However, in a slight change, rather than looking at contemporary figures, I thought we'd have a look at some historical figures. First of all is Buddhism. This is Alvin Sykes, civil rights movement. Prominent civil rights activist who was also a Buddhist. He discovered the faith at the age of 18 years old. Born in the United States of America, he was actually very important in the world of law. What's incredible, though, is that he was entirely self-taught. He didn't graduate from high school. He didn't go to law school. He actually taught himself law at his local library. Where his work was particularly important was bringing in a law that meant that cold case murder cases that happened particularly during the civil rights period could be looked at. And it meant that lots of cases that had previously been unsolved or abandoned by the authorities would now be looked at. His life was not only a testament to his Buddhist faith, but also his fierce drive for social justice. There's a lovely quote by Brian Levin, who was director of the Center of Hate and Extremism at California State University, who summed up Alvin Sykes' work. He said, "Anyone who worked in civil rights during the last several decades knew Alvin Sykes. He changed the face of American law, and he learned it all in a Kansas City library." I find it to be the power of a great man and also the power of words. A library. Christianity is our next religion. Our next pioneer is Phillis Wheatley, born, believed, between 1753 and died in 1784. She is believed to have been born somewhere in West Africa, possibly what we know as Gambia or Senegal today. She was sold by a local chief to a trader and ended up being a slave in the province of Massachusetts. Arriving in Boston, she was bought by the Wheatley family. As was tradition for an enslaved person, she was given the surname Wheatley, and she was given the name Phillis as that was the name of the ship that had brought her over. Phillis had an extraordinary academic ability. She could read Greek and Latin classics in their original language by the age of 12. She was taken under the wing by the Wheatley's 18-year-old daughter, who had to kickstart her education. Of course, it was incredibly unusual for that time, not just for an enslaved person to have access and be supported in their education, but also a woman. She was also reading incredibly challenging passages from the Bible, which probably more than likely have influenced her Christian faith. And she wrote her first poem at the age of 14. And it's for poetry that she really became a pioneer. Collection known as Poems on Various Subjects, Religious and Moral, were published in 1773, and it's regarded as the very first volume of poetry by an African American published at those times. Of course, it's only right that the words of wisdom come from pen. In every human breast, God has implanted a principle which we call love of freedom. It is impatient of oppression and pants for deliverance. Of course, she used her poetry to make the case for the abolition of slavery and rooted that in the deep Christian love of how everybody deserves freedom and made in the image of God. Our next pioneer is from the Hindu faith. This is Alice Coltrane, an American composer, band leader, jazz musician and Hindu spiritual leader. She was a huge supporter of a type of genre of music known as spiritual jazz, which helped its listeners to gain a form of meditative state. As well as this devotional jazz, I suppose you could call it, She was also a spiritual leader and set up a center in the 1970s. And in the 1980s and the 1990s, she even recorded Hindu devotional songs. Her words of wisdom reaffirm the significance of meditation and how it is to achieve a calm state of mind. When you quiet your mind, she says, you can enter a world of clarity, peace, and understanding. Our next religious pioneer comes from the world of Islam. This stunning portrait is of Ayuba Suleiman Diallo. Ayuba was born in West Africa, we think in the early 1700s. He was from a clerical family and was well educated. He was then taken into slavery and ended up on a plantation, United States of America, as we call it now, before ending up in London in about 1733. He was clearly a charismatic individual because whilst in London, he managed to mix with the high, mighty, and the intellectuals of the day, so much so that public funds were put together so he could be released from slavery. And in 1734, he published his memoirs. These memoirs were vital in terms of showing the British public and beyond life in West Africa and also something of the Islamic faith. It was a bridge, if you like, and a bridge that people crossed on their journey to eventually the abolition of the slave trade. He helped to reaffirm and show a black identity that people had never been aware of before. There are many quotes about him, and one of my favourites is from Thomas Blewett, who was an English lawyer at the time, who said of Ayuba, his memory was extraordinary. For when he was 15 years old, he could say the whole Al-Quran, the Quran, by heart. And while he was here in England, he wrote 3 copies of it without the assistance of any other copy, and without so much as looking to one of those 3 when he wrote the others. He would often laugh at me when he heard me say I had forgot anything, and told me he hardly ever forgot anything in his life, and wondered that any other body should. Our next religious pioneer is from the Jewish faith. Born in Detroit, Michigan in 1934 and passing away at just the age of 50, this is Jackie Wilson, one of the most important figures in music history and basically one of the founders of the R&B, rock and roll, doo-wop, easy listening genre. Jackie converted to Judaism when he was an adult. Jackie even recorded songs by an American entertainer called Al Johnson. He was a very famous singer in the early 1900s. He actually appeared in the world's first talking movie, The Jazz Singer, in 1927. Al Johnson himself, Jewish, but the way that he performed and the way that it actually helped him to propel his career was by using a performance method known as blackface. This is when a white artist would use makeup to paint their face black. I suppose a key question is, why would Jackie Wilson, as an African American, want to record songs, and some other artists did, by an actor, a performer who was portraying African American community in such a cruel, characterized way? We don't really know. It might have been that Jackie saw a connection between the African American community and the Jewish community, in that both populations throughout history and even today have been persecuted, subjugated in some way. Jackie's version of the old song Rags to Riches is generally regarded as one of the finest, at least as good as Tony Bennett's. And it goes, I know I'd go from rags to riches if you would only say you care. Though my pocket may be empty, I'd be a millionaire. My clothes may still be torn and tattered, but in my heart I'd be a king. Love is all that ever mattered, or everything. Our next pioneer is from the Sikh faith. Last Black History Month, I was really excited to discover and tell you about the Kalasinga tribe. in East Africa. Well, I've gone back to them again. I was really impressed by this story of a Sikh pioneer. This is Makhan Singh Jabbal, and he was incredibly influential in terms of getting independence from the British Empire. Makhan Singh Jabbal was born in India and then moved to Kenya, along with many other Sikhs as part of that diaspora. But what's really interesting is that an Indian trade union was set up so that to protect the rights of the workers. He was elected secretary, but he wanted to make it as inclusive as possible, and he was able to convince all 500 members, okay, to change their name to make it more inclusive. And he changed the name to the Labour Trade Union of Kenya and opened membership to all Kenya. He was frequently jailed for organising strikes and for generally basically campaigning for social justice for those who worked in the British colony. But that didn't deter him. He still organised strikes when he was in jail. It's the Sikh values of inclusivity that really strike through Makhan Singh's work. And because of that, it gave the Kenyan case for independence an absolute rocket boost. And there's some brilliant blog here by Arko Dasgupta who says this: Makhan Singh's name remains an example of someone who humbled and overthrew the British in not one but two nationalist movements. He recognised how pivotal it was to challenge a politics of indifference and segregation, and in this regard carried forward Mohandas Gandhi's, contributed to Jomo Kenyatta's, and anticipated Nelson Mandela's work. An astonishing figure who made a real difference to the destiny of the nation of Kenya. There is no way I can do justice to these 6 remarkable lives in a few minutes. However, if it has inspired you to dive a little deeper, then that can only be a good thing. So much for watching. I'll see you next time and enjoy your learning.